keeping you up to speed on all your Colorado teams. It's time for Coffee Break.
Happy Tuesday to you all out there, except Boston Celtics fans, I suppose, because I was in attendance at the game last night, and despite being undermanned, losing their 4 and their 5 for the night, the Nuggets gave it a good shot, but ultimately came up short. And I have a few questions for another man that was in the building last night, which is our guy Jake Shapiro. He covers the Nuggets beat as closely as anybody. The Buffs. He's a little bit of a catch-all for us here at the station. Jake, how are you, man?
I'm good. A little disappointed, not in the Nuggets' effort last night, but in the fact that Nikola Jokic didn't play. I had this game circled literally since the calendar came out. Every year for us on the website, I do a 5 games you must see if you're a Denver Nuggets fan in the regular season, and this was one of those 5. So really unfortunate Nikola Jokic caught a little bit of an illness and could not play last night because I was really looking forward to that game, but hopefully he's feeling okay and maybe can give it a go tonight against the Clippers.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, this is a game. This is the finals matchup we thought we were going to have the year the Nuggets made their title run. They ultimately fell short coming out of the East, and it was kind of the what if or what could have been. And then since then, it's kind of been the matchup that we've been wanting for and pining for. And then, this past season, the Celtics made it and completed their journey. The Nuggets were the ones that fell short. And so I agree with you. This was a game that from the very beginning, it was like, hey, this is one. If you're going to go to one game, or 5 games, as you said, all year, this is definitely on that list. And the Jokic news kind of came down late, right before tip-off. I certainly wasn't hearing a lot of buzz, and beforehand heading into it. I actually found out on the way to the game from our guy Will Peterson on Denver Sports Tonight, who kind of relayed it as it broke out over the air. So have we gotten any additional details? Was there any extra context between the end of the game last night and this morning about what Jokic is dealing with and whether or not his status for tonight is trending in the right direction?
So they said that Jokic came down with an illness Monday at practices when he started feeling a little bit ill. Kind of find it strange. He was never on the injury report Monday initially before the game. Tuesday, leading into the game yesterday, he hit the injury report late in the day as probable with an illness, then downgraded to questionable. Before the game, they talked about how he was going to try and give it a go. Wasn't out there for his normal warm-up time. A couple reporters saw him leave the building with a trainer about an hour before tip-off, and then it was announced he would not be playing in the game. TNT let it slip that Michael Malone kind of knew he wasn't going to play earlier in the day when he was talking to the team via their broadcast. And then after the game, what I got was that they were hopeful that he was going to give it a go tomorrow, but they had no indication as to whether or not he could actually play, and tomorrow now being today when they play the Clippers on Wednesday. And I will say this matchup against the Clippers, and I know we'll get back to the Celtics, now features Kawhi Leonard, who is back for the Clippers. And the Clippers have given the Nuggets a very hard time this year because the Nuggets have struggled to contain perimeter guards and three-point shooters, and the Clippers feature 2 of those guys in Norm Powell and James Harden. I talked to Julian Strother a little bit about that after the game. Is the Nuggets' primary problem perhaps with rebounding, which I talked to Jamal Murray about, and both of them they believe come down to an effort issue, though Jamal Murray made an interesting comment about roster construction and just the guys that are on the team with the rebounding issue. And Jamal's point being Aaron hasn't played most of the season thus far, and he's our starting power forward. Of course we're going to struggle with rebounds.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you touched on a couple of things as it relates to the game last night, because I do want to look ahead a little bit to the Clippers as well. But as it relates to the game last night, I think that if you were to put it just on paper, a team like the Nuggets, walking into a game against the defending world champions without your starting 5, who's arguably, if not, unarguably at this point, the best player in the world, and your starting 4 in Aaron Gordon, who, as you alluded to, has a massive impact on the physical presence in the paint and the rebounding aspect of things. It's a pretty grim prospect. And yet the Nuggets, through some pretty efficient conversions from beyond the arc, were able to tie it up at halftime at 57, kept it relatively a game into the third quarter before Boston just completely turned the fire hose on late. I felt like there were some encouraging things to glean out of a loss like that in a game that I think you definitely had a chance of winning if everyone was healthy. Would you agree?
For the first 40 minutes of that game, it was total Ewing theory, which is the Ewing theory, for those who do not know, that sometimes players or teams are better without their star player because role players up and elevate. And then in the end of the day, the Nuggets don't cover the spread and it looks bad on the total line.
Sure.
But that's not the story of the game. The Nuggets were tied at 93 with like 8 minutes to go in that game. Celtics go on, run. What I will tell you is what was fascinating last night is that the Nuggets shot more and made more threes than the Boston Celtics, who lead the NBA in makes and takes. And the Nuggets, for those who do not know, are last in the NBA in takes. So they're actually, the Nuggets' efficiency is third in the league, but without Jokic, they said, let's bomb away from three. It was really akin to kind of like a 5-12 matchup in the March Madness where it was like, all right, we're going to try and equalize this with 3-point shooting, see how that goes. But what I will tell you, because I got asked this question a couple times last night by our listeners and some colleagues, there are some positives, but the positives are all not necessarily based off last night. Like Julian Strawther, we've seen been budding for a little bit now. It's not like last night was when the switch flipped.
Sure.
Peyton Watson playing backup center minutes is something the Nuggets have toyed with and have been successful with at times throughout the season. And he was awesome in the San Antonio game a couple nights ago. So it wasn't like this was the flip being switched or the switch being flipped for Peyton Watson. I got my switches flipped in that there. But what I think was really telling, Richie, more so than the 3-point shooting or Watson or Strawther, is the negative. And that is, do you know how many field goals the Nuggets centers, Dario Saric, Zeke Naji, and DeAndre Jordan made last night? How many field goals?
It can't be very many. And if there were any, they were mostly made by DeAndre Jordan because the other two seemed awful.
So they made 0. They combined for 1 point. DeAndre Jordan hit a free throw.
Okay.
The three of them in total combined for, and get this because this is crazy, 6 rebounds as well. So the Nuggets front court, and part of this is because Deron Holmes was hurt, their first round pick, and Vlatko Čančar is hurt, but they have no depth. The Dario Saric signing, and he hadn't played since November 23rd, is a total miss. So that's the bigger story to me last night, is that, yeah, they've got some pieces, and maybe that we've been too hard on the pieces around Nikola Jokic that continually play. Those guys really stepped it up last night, but ultimately they're so flawed because they cannot win without Nikola Jokic on the floor because of who's behind him at center. It's not necessarily because of what's around him when he's on the floor, but what's behind him.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because you and I actually we're talking a little bit during the game, and you made that observation. I kind of made the joke to you that, man, it just feels like if you're watching the Nuggets and you can cognitively register like, oh yeah, DeAndre Jordan's been out there for a minute, that's like not a great sign. And you astutely pointed out that, Deron Holmes, Vlatko Čančar, like DeAndre Jordan is absorbing a lot of the minutes that those guys couldn't play. And who knows what the balance of this team and, what that front court presence would look like had those guys not been injured the way that they are.
Yeah, I think Deron Holmes would be having a awesome year, honestly, and they traded up for him in the draft, and he fit a lot of what they were trying to do. So really unfortunate that he goes down in the Summer League game. Literally looked awesome in that Summer League game before he got hurt. And you're forced to play Hunter Tyson, who's probably not an NBA player. You're forced to play DeAndre Jordan, who should probably be coaching at this point, though. He's provided some really good spurts for the Nuggets for about 5 to 6 minutes. Probably shouldn't be playing more than that a night. And Dario Saric was just an absolute miss. And unfortunately, that Zeke Naji contract is only getting worse, and it's going to be on your books for quite a while here. And last night was a really good matchup in terms of physicality and athleticism for him of what he can go against. And yet we talk about these three guys, and the Nuggets' best center last night was Peyton Watson, who's 6'7". So that is a problem. The Nuggets need to figure that out. And, they don't really have many avenues to improve their roster. And we were talking about that last night of it almost makes more sense for them to just punt on the season and run it back next year and try to reload in the offseason than it does to try and make a major swing this season. And I know it's really bad to say about a team that features one of the greatest basketball players ever at his peak.
Punting.
that's just what the ramifications are of the new collective bargaining agreement.
Jake, what have you? I'm glad that you referenced that, because I was going to ask you a little GM Shapiro kind of notes there in terms of things that you would do if you were in the shoes of Calvin Booth and the rest of the organization. Defensively, it feels like the Nuggets have left a lot to be desired through major stretches of this season. Just as someone who's had their eyes, on the team night in and night out, what are your biggest observations or diagnoses as far as why the Nuggets can't seem to figure it out defensively, regardless of the rotations that they've played around with?
So I think, to me, the biggest telltale signs the Nuggets defense has taken a big step back this season. Last year, the Nuggets defensive rebounding percentage was like middle of the pack. This year, defensive rebounding possession, so the amount of rebounds that come off the rim when you're on defense, is 23rd in the NBA. The Nuggets have really struggled defensively rebounding. And again, part of that is because Aaron Gordon has missed a large chunk of this season. But part of it is because, Nikola Jokic and Michael Porter Jr. are the only two guys that really grab rebounds on this team. Even Russell Westbrook isn't the rebounder that he was, 4 or 5 years ago. So that's a big problem for the Nuggets. They can't clear possessions. And it's really funny to talk about this because if they got more of those rebounds, the Nuggets have increased their pace and they're the best transition scoring team in the NBA. So if they were able to score or collect more of those rebounds, it would instantly lead to more offense, let alone more defense, because they're getting out in transition and running. The other problem, and this is number one, Richie, and this is the KCP problem right here. Last year, the Nuggets were like top 3 in 3-point shots attempted by the other team. This year, they're bottom 3. They're allowing one of the most amount of 3-point shots in the NBA. And this is hard to kind of consider because, the makes aren't what you should look at. The takes are more indicative of the defense being played. The makes are kind of luck and who they've played and the skill of their opponents and stuff like that. But all you need to know is the Nuggets went from one of the best teams at defending 3-point shots to one of the worst season over season. So while the Nuggets don't shoot many threes, that was true of the team last year. And yet they were so much better in their ratings, and all the advanced stats were so much better last year than it was this year. The 2 points of they don't defend the 3-point shot and they don't collect enough defensive rebounds are the 2 sole reasons that the Nuggets sit here as more of a middling team rather than a contender.
So what do you attribute that to, Drake? When I say that, I mean the significantly larger amount of 3-point attempts made against them when they're playing defense, because wasn't that one of the hallmarks of trying to re-sign or trying to bring back a KCP, was his ability to defend the perimeter and the contributions that he made there, and that there was faith that Christian Braun could step into that role and make some of those adjustments. So is it just as simple as Christian Braun hasn't done enough on the defensive perimeter side to make up for KCP, or is there more at play there?
It's a lot of Christian Braun, and the Nuggets probably trusted him and made the Christian Braun move too early. I think that's maybe looked upon in retrospect. I mean, I was pining for KCP all offseason. I talked about it being a bad move. And yeah, the Nuggets probably can't sign the Murray extension and Gordon extensions, which that Murray extension, if they weren't able to sign that, maybe that looks good in retrospect. I don't know. I'm not there yet. Like a lot of people, I still think it was good, but I'm just putting that out there. I personally would have re-signed KCP and then tried to move him this offseason to try and get Aaron Gordon back long-term. It would have kept you from also being able to sign Dario Saric, which again would have been a good move because the Nuggets would have been limited because they would have been into that second apron. So basically by not signing KCP, the Nuggets kept flexibility, and what they've done with that flexibility is dig themselves a deeper hole. So it's really frustrating looking at how the Nuggets have tried to strategize against this. And yeah, KCP at this point in his career, probably not worth the paycheck that he's collecting. And that's only going to be true next year and the year after because he's getting older. But at the same point, the Orlando Magic are the best defense in the NBA this year. And they're without their 2 best players and maybe their 3rd best player now in Jalen Suggs, who's also hurt. And they're without their best backup center. So there's something going on there. And the new thing going on there is KCP. So KCP does not get enough credit for how good he was throughout that Nuggets run. And by the way, he was also the third best Nuggets three-point shooter last year.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about them struggling at shooting threes. We're talking about them struggling to defend threes. A lot of their matchup problems that have come this year in guarding guys like James Harden or sizing against the Boston Celtics or the Cleveland Cavaliers have come because Jamal Murray's now not the worst defender on the court. He's sometimes he's one of the two worst defenders on the court. So it's really hard to play basketball when you've got two guys on the other team that they can target. And then on the other end, you've got the other team sinking off Christian, sinking off Aaron, sinking off Russ because they don't think you can shoot threes yourself. So it's just not a recipe for winning in 2024, 2025 in the NBA. So a lot of this does come back to the KCP decision, but also Aaron Gordon has missed a super big chunk of the season. He's probably the Nuggets' third or fourth best player, depending on the night. MPGA has been awesome this year, but no matter how good he is, he's not meant to be the second best player on a championship team. Nikola Jokic has had to space the floor a lot and shoot more threes himself, which has been really cool to see and has led to one of the best offensive seasons we've ever seen in the history of the NBA. But it also means the Nuggets are collecting less offensive rebounds and second chance points because he's not around the hoop. At the same time, Christian Braun has been struggling to not only shoot threes, but he cannot navigate screens. He is not as nimble and fleet of foot as KCP is. Part of the thinking on this decision, Richie, is if you look at the West and the premier players in the West, a lot of these guys are like Devin Booker, Luka Doncic, LeBron James. They're bigger wing stout guys. So the Nuggets thought, hey, we can have Christian Braun be our primary point of attack defender on a lot of these guys, Anthony Edwards included, who they just lost to in a playoff series, because we don't need a KCP because guys like Steph Curry no longer lead the West. Damian Lillard not in the West anymore. Steph Curry's team not relevant anymore. Well, there are other teams with really good guards in the West that are smaller and more nimble, whether that be a Ja Morant, a James Harden. And those teams have maybe been better than people expected. And that's what's given the Nuggets trouble. And that's not even to mention the Houston Rockets, who we're going to see here in a week play, who have Jalen Green and Fred VanVleet. And that's going to be a matchup nightmare for the Denver Nuggets. So a lot of this comes down to strategizing matchups and what you thought was going to be best for the Denver Nuggets. The fact of the matter is Calvin Booth has just struck out on most of these decisions.
Yeah, well, and one of those decisions, and I'll close with a little two-parter here as it relates to the Nuggets. One of those decisions was Russell Westbrook, who I still maintain, I think, for what they paid for him and for what, other options they had with the limited flexibility that they had. I actually think Russell Westbrook, for the most part, at this point in the season, acknowledging that it's still early in the season and the postseason is a different animal, has given you above expected in terms of his performance on the court. Now, I think he has moments like last night where turnovers and other things kind of dim some of that, rubs a little bit of scuff into the shine of an otherwise decent performance. But what is it about Russell Westbrook's game that we're seeing right now that seems to fall off dramatically or shift when it comes to the postseason, where we've seen him be an absolute liability for previous teams that he's been on in the last 5 years?
Simply put, teams game plan in the postseason against the other team. Most nights when you're playing in the NBA, you game plan for what gives you the most success, not what stops the opponent. Whereas in the postseason, there's matchups and there's adjustments and you're trying to figure out.
We're playing the same team 4 or 5 times in a row. And
So, and you've seen some of this late in games for the Nuggets when they've lost in crunch time when Russell Westbrook is on the floor. Throughout the course of the regular game, the pace that which Russell Westbrook plays with means that, generally speaking, teams are not able to sag off of him because they're putting so much pressure on the rim and they're putting pressure on the defense and they don't have time to adjust or switch. Well, the postseason, the game slows down and the adjustments occur. So it's Russell Westbrook without the ball in the corner, and why guard him? Because he's historically one of the worst. He's historically actually the worst volume shooter from three-point range in NBA history. So that's part of the reason why it hasn't worked with Russ. But to your point, Richie, the Nuggets could not ask for more out of a minimum contract than what they were getting out of Russell Westbrook. And it stinks to be in this position because Russ was awesome last night, but you're still asking too much out of Russ at this age. And you see some of the turnovers and the mistakes and the shots that he's taking, and you're like, no, but then you look around and you're like, what else are they supposed to do without Nikola? So it's kind of a catch-22 there with playing Russ that much. But what Russ and Nikola Jokic have developed this season in a very short time frame has been very special to watch. It's been fun to watch, and it's helped the Nuggets transition scoring, which I mentioned. Their pace has increased. So if Russ can be your guy throughout the course of the regular season, help increase some of the things in those areas, and help get the Nuggets through the regular season, that's a successful signing. Now, should he be playing in crunch time come playoff time? No. And that's going to be the habit that Michael Malone's going to need to break in order for the Nuggets to win a playoff series, is he cannot put Russell Westbrook out there for the last 5 minutes of a playoff game.
I want to transition here on the back half to the Colorado Buffaloes, another team that you are very closely intertwined with and have a strong presence up there in Boulder. The draft is just a few months away, and we now know what the first, I think it's 18 picks in the NFL draft and how they're going to be slotted in terms of the teams that'll be picking. And it seems pretty widely accepted by and large that Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter are going to be two of the top 4, 5, 6, top 10 at the worst picks selected in the NFL draft. But I think there's an interesting layer to the discussion because of comments and things we've heard in the past from Dion and his camp and from Shedeur and little subliminal messages about, could Shedeur pull an Eli Manning or a John Elway and with Dion's blessing, try to avoid a situation that is unfavorable to him, as he transitions to the NFL level. And I think with some of the teams that you're looking at picking at the top, like the Tennessee Titans, like the Cleveland Browns, especially two teams that are picking 1 and 2 and need quarterbacks, that might not be a situation that's as appealing as the New York Giants or the Las Vegas Raiders, who really fell out of their chance in the top 5 there. So, Jake, as it sits right now, do you think there's a reasonable chance that we might see some strong-arming shenanigans from Dion and his son?
Yes is the short answer. And the scenario in which this plays out, to me, is if Tennessee decides to draft Cam Ward at 1, the University of Miami quarterback, former Washington State quarterback, who we saw play in Boulder. Now, if they also draft Travis Hunter, number 1, which I'd be shocked because they need a quarterback. This could also play out this way. And this is what I mean. I do not think that Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders are going to Cleveland under any circumstance. So if someone goes number 1 that is not Shedeur Sanders to Tennessee, then Pandora's box opens on what happens in this draft. And to answer the question, I think it's highly likely Travis Hunter ends up with the New York Giants at number 3, unless
I was just going to bring this up.
Shenanigans get pulled where Cam Ward goes number 1. The Cleveland Browns are left with basically just they can't draft Shedeur or do and trade out of it or whatever. And then all of a sudden, the New York Giants are the team that ends up with Shedeur Sanders, which then might mean Travis Hunter gets drafted by the Cleveland Browns or falls to number 4 with the New England Patriots. Though I'm hearing some buzz with the Patriots about them looking for an offensive tackle. And if you watch that team at all, they need an offensive tackle. There's a scenario where Travis Hunter, who's the best player in the country, he won the Heisman, ends up going number 5, which I'm sorry, I don't even know who's the number 5 team in the draft this year. I haven't.
Trey, go ahead and throw it back up on the board. I think it's Jacksonville, maybe?
Which would suck, Richie. I don't want to see Travis go to Jacksonville.
Yep, I would agree. But I'm glad that you mentioned that because I thought about the same thing. If there is legitimate buzz coming out of NFL circles, and you can corroborate this, that Cam Ward is starting to supplant Shedeur Sanders as the top quarterback prospect, and everybody has their bevy of reasons, and some are fed by, sides that have things to gain and things like that. I don't think we're quite in lying season yet, but, sometimes you don't need a season.
Let me show you something that maybe people don't realize, and I don't have the stats memorized because I'm not quite on NFL draft prep yet, but I watched a lot of Pac-12 football. Cam Ward was in the Pac-12. I watched a lot of University of Miami football last year too, because there was some, they were kind of neck and neck with Colorado with where they were. Cam Ward's stats, his interception stats look pretty good. His fumble stats look really bad. A lot of people won't bring up the fumbles.
Right.
He has a lot more turnovers than people think because he fumbled the ball quite a bit. And yeah, Shedeur has a sack problem, and I could go over the litany of issues with Shedeur. I personally think Shedeur is a little bit better of a quarterback than Cam Ward, and I'm not even that high on Shedeur, even though I'm a CU guy. I think Shedeur's ceiling might be, a mid-tier to above average quarterback in the NFL. I think he has some serious issues with athleticism once he reaches the next level, and that sack stuff, and some of his timing stuff is just not great. But I do think that he's significantly better than Cam Ward, who, for my money, is not an NFL quarterback, but was put in a system and had been in the college for so long that he thrived at the University of Miami this year. And yeah, he had some success at Washington State, but he was not that special at Washington State. And granted, this is a very similar situation to Jaden Daniels, and we've seen how he's done this year. So, maybe I'm eating my words after this, but I'm just telling you, it's legitimate that Cam Ward might go number one.
And I agree with you. I think that's definitely a possibility. It's corroborated by a lot of, draft pundits and league sources across the board. And if it, sometimes these things happen and then the exact opposite, that's just the nature of the NFL draft. Cecil Lammey and others hate the word crapshoot. But sometimes it does kind of feel like you're walking into that and you have no idea where it could go. Very rarely are there times where it's like, we knew Trevor Lawrence was going to be the number one overall pick from the time he was a freshman, and Andrew Luck and, yada, yada, yada. But, as it relates to Travis Hunter, he's not Deion Sanders' son by blood. He doesn't carry the Sanders name, but for all other intents and purposes, he is. So if Deion Sanders is willing to play strong arm and hardball to make sure that his son Shedeur doesn't land in a city like Cleveland, and let's say they do just that hypothetical scenario plays out where the Giants flip from 3-2 with the Cleveland Browns, they take Shedeur Sanders, and the Cleveland has the opportunity to draft Travis Hunter at 3. Why would Deion not use some of those same tactics and feelings for his adopted son, who he's carried along the journey the entire way with his actual son, Shedeur, to make sure that he lands in a more favorable spot?
Well, you have to wonder if that Cleveland, while obviously a bad situation for a quarterback, is it a bad situation for a receiver or a cornerback? Obviously,
it hasn't been for Denzel Ward.
Right. And that defense is really good. And you have Myles Garrett and you have Kevin Stefanski, who's one of the most thought out coaches in the NFL. So that might not be a bad situation for the Browns. But in theory, if Deion, for some reason, thought it was a bad situation, I'm with you. I think he's standing up and putting his foot down. The thing that we've heard is that Travis and Shedeur will not be showing up at the draft because they're going to be doing their own thing. It's not Shedeur doing his own thing with Deion. It's Travis and Shedeur because he is part of the family, as you recognize. The thing is, again, Jacksonville, terrible situation. And that to me is the one where I'd go, I'm not going there if I'm Travis Hunter and I'm putting my foot down. But he's from West Palm Beach. He might want to play in Jacksonville because he's from Florida. So, he got out of Florida and it was a good decision. He's talked about that. He talked about that in his Heisman speech. One of the best things that ever happened to him was getting out of Florida. But maybe now that he is a grown man and, he's accomplished some stuff, maybe going back to Florida is something that he would want to do. So, I think the way this draft landed, it's not as interesting as the scenario as we may have gotten had some really bad teams that ended up at the top with some really just know where to go franchises. You can talk yourself into Nashville, Tennessee if you're Shedeur Sanders. That's an awesome place to live.
Yeah.
You can talk yourself into New York, obviously.
Yeah.
Though I do think, especially for Shedeur, who has a relationship with Tom Brady, I think there is a lot of smoke and a lot of truth to the fact that
100%.
Vegas was real.
Vegas. Oh yeah. He was at those games.
Really fun in the AFC West, by the way.
Oh, I was genuinely, I know it sounds crazy, I was genuinely hoping for it because I think a player like Shedeur, with the archetype that he carries and the Deion Sanders name and the hype train around there, is tailor-made for a city like Vegas. You could spin it to the Big Apple in New York where the lights are the brightest, but Shedeur screams Las Vegas. He's got the watch, he's got the swag, he's got a little bit of that cocky kind of bravado to him that I think matches the way that the Raiders kind of carry themselves. He's not
You could
afraid
see
to.
you could see him and Wayne Newton hanging out right now.
Yes, exactly. So I was hoping for it. If Las Vegas, who, like you said, with Tom Brady in the minority ownership, and the connection that Shedeur and Tom Brady have, as well as their inherent need for a quarterback, with a new coaching staff that will be coming in, and I think it'll be curious to see who they pick and if there are any ties to either Dion, or Shedeur implicitly or explicitly, and what that could bring. The last thing I want to touch on with the Buffs has to do with Coach Prime himself. I was listening to Joel Klatt earlier with our guys in the morning, Stokely and Evans with Mark Schlereth, and he flat out said the question was in relation to Coach Prime and a new deal that may be upcoming or other options and temptations that Coach Prime may have. And Joel Klatt flat out said that Coach Prime has an offer in front of him that he has not signed. And Joel saying, I question why he hasn't already done it, implying that the financial component of the deal is large enough that wouldn't be a concern. And the only logical drawing point from there is that Coach Prime is either intentionally or unintentionally keeping his eyes and ears open for other things that may come about. Does that resonate with you at all? Does that line up with anything that you may have heard up there in Boulder?
Yeah. The thing is, a lot of what I was hearing was before Juju Lewis committed. And once Juju Lewis committed, it died down and it seemed really like Dion would stay because you wanted to honor that commitment and you've built that program. I will put this out there, and this is a little tinfoil hatty, but this is kind of where I'm at. Is Dion not signing the extension because he wants to stay open to leverage his freedom to help Shedeur land in the right place? So is Dion keeping his ability to move theoretically as a power play, not against CU, but to help his son? That's kind of where I'm at.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know, because I think that, there were questions in the past of, could Colorado afford to give him the deal that he had earned based on the results and the attention and the money that he poured in? But then the real answer is they really can't afford not to. And there was questions about whether or not they could afford the first deal they gave him, and they found ways to cobble it together. And I do think that, to lean into your tinfoil hat, I do think that everything Coach Prime has done, by and large, for a guy who's lived the majority of his adult life, the entirety really of his adult life, in the spotlight and in the limelight, so many of the things that he's done have been done with the goal in mind of setting up his son and his adopted son and his family for success. And so it is not that tinfoil hat of me to lean into what you're saying and say, hey, I think that there's smoke to that theory. Because again, when you're Deion Sanders with the situation that he has, you hold all the cards. Your son is one of the top 2 quarterback prospects. Your adopted son is the number 1 overall graded prospect in this draft. Colorado is going to want to do anything you tell them to do because you're the best thing that's happened to them in decades. So I don't see a reason why Dion couldn't or wouldn't, or frankly shouldn't, do that if that is indeed what he's intending.
Yeah, the interesting part is that, and this puts a hole in the theory, is I don't know if the contract extension part of it leaks without that further bit of information, if the sides are on the same page. Though Joel is very connected, obviously, in the University of Colorado's athletic department. What I will tell you is, obviously, Dion's not going to get hired as a head coach in April in the NFL, right. But there is a scenario here in which, even if Shedeur goes to where he wants, maybe he leverages it so Shiloh ends up on the same team in the 6th round, in the 7th round. So it's a package deal. And part of that is Dion saying, I'm going to pull both of my sons where I've got an offer from XYZ team, and I can be an offensive analyst for a year. And then next year I'm going to slide in and be their OC in the NFL. Like, he could take some random job for an NFL organization that might want him there where his sons play. And, he's going to be the biggest voice in the room, even if his title is just offensive analyst or whatever. So, there's a lot of scenarios in which this can play out because, Richie, we've never seen this. We've seen a similar situation with the Mannings because they're the first family of America, right? Like, they're our royal family. Well, that's white America. Black America, their royal family is the Sanders, man. Like,
okay, I'm with you.
It's true, and they have a bravado, and they have a power, and it is well within their rights. And honestly, Richie, and I love it because me and you, we get to pick our jobs after we graduate college. We can go to any market we want. We can try to make it work there. And, maybe it's a bad situation. Maybe we're not talented enough. Who knows? But we get to pick. Shedeur doesn't get to pick.
Yeah.
Until his dad, who's one of the most powerful people in sports, goes, no, my son's going to have at least some options here. So I love it because I think it's absolutely messed up that 18 to 21-year-olds that enter pro sports have to enter this draft system. I have not figured out a better solution from the team's perspective and the league's perspective, but from the player's perspective, it's kind of messed up, especially in baseball, that you might be stuck with an organization for 12 years before you get the choice of where you actually want to play.
Yeah, listen, by and large, I align closely with you when it comes to I am in favor of players doing things and making moves that are right for them because of the control that they are under, especially at the NFL level, once they get to that point. So I'm all for it. Now, I will say, if Coach Prime, if Coach Prime takes it to the level where he's starting to map out almost like the Bronny James level thing, where it's like we're mapping out, not only are you going to do this with my son here, but you're also going to draft my other son in the 6th or 7th round, where he might be an undrafted prospect. Had he not had that influence, it'll start to feel a little bit like the LiAngelo Ball next to LaMelo and Lonzo kind of situation.
That corner. Whoa.
Yeah. Hey, shout out to LiAngelo for going viral because it's not just it wasn't just the Broncos locker room that they were playing that. His song is popping everywhere in sports franchises across the country and obviously on social media and what have you. As it relates to choice, because I just thought of this as you were saying it too. I saw some comments, as I'm sure we all did, from Travis Hunter recently about, again, the notion that's come up a bunch of times because of the unique nature of his role, about the concept of playing both positions, or both sides of the football, I should say, in the NFL, being wide receiver and corner. And basically the quote that I had read from him was, "I'm tired of people telling me what I can and can't do who aren't me and don't know me. And people think that I can't do it, and that's great. People didn't think I could do it at this level, and I fully intend to do it at the next level." How much I fully believe Travis, and the intent and the merit behind his words, but how much play do you think he gets truly from an NFL franchise you don't even have to necessarily factor in those first 5 teams that are probably going to be the ones we're dealing with, but just in general at the NFL level where you kind of, it's the pinnacle of every player on your college team was the best player in this history of their high school, probably, to a certain degree, or definitely on their high school team. And every player in the NFL was one of, if not the greatest players at their college. And so as we continue to shrink that margin for error and the speed and physicality with which the game is played, do you genuinely think that there's merit to Travis Hunter playing both ways at the NFL level, even getting a chance to, let alone doing it successfully?
So he's going to. I'll put it that way. But look at the New York Giants and the New England Patriots the last 2 weeks. Both of them won games that they shouldn't have. They were tanking, and they still won games. Because in the NFL, every coach and every single player is always playing for their next paycheck and their job. So it doesn't matter if you're trying to tank. Unlike the NBA, where you can kind of control this. And that's why the NFL doesn't have a tanking problem. So looking at Travis, put him in a situation where he is in a winning team or a losing team. Doesn't matter. The coach will see that he is probably the best cornerback that is on that roster and probably the second or third best receiver on that roster. You're going to tell me that NFL coach is going to go, oh, well, our GM's a little concerned about the injury, so we're going to limit his playing time. Second half of a game, it's a one-score game because every game in the NFL is a one-score game. You're telling me they're not running Travis out every single play? They're running Travis out because that's how it works in the NFL. And if you have a chance to win, you're putting your best players out on the field. It doesn't matter that it's never been done before. If Travis gives you a better opportunity to win, he's going to be out on the field both sides of the ball. Winning team, losing team does not matter. So I highly expect Travis to be one of those guys. And let's say he does end up on the New York Giants. He is their best cornerback today. He is their second best receiver today behind Malik Neighbors. You are going to see him play both ways for, well, probably Drew Lock. Well, I don't know if we're still here, but I'm being told there is a power outage back at the studio, and that's going to wrap up Coffee Break for today. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe to Denver Sports on YouTube if you are hearing this. Richie will be back with Coffee Break tomorrow on Thursday at noon. Jake Shapiro signing off.